I want to know the knock-on effects of China-U.S., U.S.-China, China-U.S., to the emerging markets of this globe. What does it mean, not for Mexico, not the N11 nations, but what does it mean for emerging a market around the world?
It's not good news for emerging markets, not good news, period. Now, this is the response to the steel and aluminum tariffs. So it is a somewhat limited response. It's calculated to deal with the size of the exports of Chinese products to the United States on aluminum and steel. But there is a better way here, which was designed by the G20, and that means the United States and China and all the G20 leaders, which is the Global Forum on Excess Steel Capacity, which we established precisely to deal with the substance of the problem. And if we don't deal with the substance of the problem, we will continue to deal only with the manifestations, and we'll be, putting tariffs on each other. And the OECD is a facilitator on this global forum. It is working. It is making progress. We should give it a chance.
Within that, and giving it a chance, the fact is, Angel, the President of the United States doesn't want to facilitate anything. He's looking at this in a very discrete, unilateral basis. Can there be a move from a multilateral discourse over to some form of bilateral solutions to get us off this trade war tact?
Clearly, China and the United States would have to be part of the solution, but the multilateral setting is the one that will work when you're talking about excess capacity. And here you're talking about excess capacity not only in steel and aluminum, there's also in chemicals, and there's also in lumber, and there's also in flat glass and a number of other things. So dealing with this and creating a way in which we can address these fundamental issues rather than applying tariffs to each other is clearly the better way. It is going to be in everybody's best interest. So, as you said, it's not just for the disadvantage of the emerging economies, it's bad news for everybody.
Doesn't America have a point? Isn't America being treated unfairly? Shouldn't there be some change in the way that trade between these two countries work?
The question of imports and exports has to do with comparative advantage. It has to do with productivity. Now, if there are unfair practices, there is a place and there is a way in which you can denounce them and take them and get a judgment, and then even eventually get sanctions if necessary. That's called the World Trade Organization.
The fact that the US is going down this route, though, indicates that it doesn't feel that that mechanism works anymore.
Well, I would say that, again, there's a World Trade Organization, and when you're talking about excess capacity, which is a specific problem, which triggered this question. Why? Because it's a massive question. That we have now 1/3 of the total installed capacity of steel is surplus. Okay, so the problem is countries are selling it at below cost and creating a lot of pressures around the world. A lot of companies are being shut, people are being laid off. So the question to deal with that is only one, which is reduce capacity in an organized, negotiated way, rather than in this, through the sanction way.
Okay, Karen, is multilateralism working at this point? There are a lot of rocks being thrown at globalization. There are a lot of rocks being thrown at the multilateral process, which doesn't seem to be functioning. In many ways, the Trump administration has grown frustrated with that, and as a result of which it's responding in the way that it is. Have we gone too far with multilateralism?
Guy, I think you're right. Unfortunately, I think the process should work, but clearly the politicians are not feeling that they are getting sufficient sufficient scale response from these multilateral organisations. And it's really now, I think, for the multilateral organisations to say, right, we're stepping in, we have a role to play, we can act quickly, we can be the mediator in this. And they need to do that really promptly, because I think the longer we go through days and weeks where they sort of sit on the sidelines or say, we could play a role here, then I think that question of, them not being the basis for discussion anymore is absolutely going to continue.
This was actually a tailor-made solution to a problem that was meant to be faster and more focused, and that is exactly what is happening. But as I said, we got to give it a chance.
Mr. Secretary General, I want to bring up a chart. I did this chart just for you to impress you with the Bloomberg knowledge. This is inflation-adjusted soybeans back half a century. And there's a huge boom that Angel and I studied in school on 70s boom. But what's important here, Angel, is this chart clearly shows the commodity deflation across many globalizations. Can the new globalization, can the new logistics, is it possible that that can survive in a commodity deflation?
You and I learned in the same schools that there is a fundamental question of supply and demand. And there's also a question, of course, of changing attitudes and changing patterns of consumption by the public. Then you take those three things into account and you get a resulting price. There have been these booms in the prices of raw materials. Then there's been an adjustment. It's almost a predictable cycle.
Right.
So I would think that today what we're seeing is a normalization, but there's a very massive change in consumption patterns in China.